Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Masri and Kira Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show, and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show, where we deep dive into CRM success and failure, delivering real stories with real impact. I'm Dave Masri.
And I'm Kira Whitey.
And today we're talking with Onttu Lindeman, the former VP of CRM at Members First Credit Union. Welcome, Onttu.
Thank you for having me.
So Onttu, we've known each other for a few years, but for those that maybe are hearing from you for the first time, give our listeners a bit of an overview about yourself, how long you've been in the Salesforce ecosystem, and what you typically do.
Sure. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem since about 2008. I've usually been on the client side, so I've been end user Salesforce, managing the system, admin, solution architect, Salesforce leader, VP, executive, whatever you want to call it, running implementations from the client side. I've also worked at Salesforce itself for a few years, and that was more consulting work. So
nice. And so some of the companies that you've had the pleasure of supporting as an FTE or during your time at Salesforce?
I was in two main areas, health and manufacturing, and I did a little bit in the financial services area, which led to me later going into financial services for Members First. But yeah, had a deep manufacturing background coming from Textron, but I pivoted into Health Cloud as that was a big growth area for Salesforce at the time. They wanted people to really help them grow their Health Cloud expansion at the time. So that was a totally unique experience for me. And I worked with several cancer companies that were using Salesforce to handle their cancer patient intake and scheduling, reimbursement, all that sort of thing. So,
awesome. So I know one of the topics we're going to cover today that you're passionate around is really defining what an actual implementation process looks like. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of that, do you want to just kind of give us an idea of perhaps where your passion around that topic comes from by just giving us a overview of maybe some of the frustrations you might have experienced along the way?
Certainly. I would say out of all the implementations I've done, Textron, when we did it at Textron Specialized Vehicles, which is a vehicle manufacturing, probably the largest golf car company in the world. That was the first time that we ever implemented a system where I felt groundwork was done. I was in place before negotiations ever occurred. And it really prevented a lot of the issues I would see later. So, for example, at Howard Hughes or at Members First, I would be brought in long after that ship sailed. The things that can cause is nobody understands the licensing model they signed up for. Nobody understands the shelfware they have. Just let's talk about that. Poor licensing strategy. That's your direct pocket. That hurts your pocket. Any company that doesn't have somebody who understands Salesforce licensing costs, the model, the licenses you need to use, what you'll consume. I mean, you're basically spending money that's just going to sit there and rot. Also, it's not going to make the users happy to have things they can't use, or we're told in an intro that they're going to be able to use, but it never comes to fruition because, you actually bought the starter and not the growth. The growth does that. The starter doesn't. You didn't understand that. On and on. So things like that can heavily be mitigated by bringing in an expert as early as possible to do those things. So without that roadmap and that license understanding, you're starting to build a house, like I said earlier, without having an architect that knows how to design houses. So
whose fault is that? I know we don't necessarily like to point fingers, but we're feeling a little bit quirky today. So whose fault is that? Is that the Salesforce's fault? Is that the customer's fault for being too gullible and just trusting Salesforce? Is it a bit of both?
It's shared 100%. Salesforce is attempting to push this narrative the whole time that this is super easy, which is a sales tactic, which makes sense. I understand why they're doing that. But the customer, which is the company, is somewhat to blame, because they should know, with all their other products they've ever bought and anything else they've ever implemented or anything they've ever built, you can't do that without some expertise. So trusting Salesforce to tell you this is going to be so easy, it's going to run itself, and you can have a few people do this part-time. I mean, just look at the price tag. If you're spending under $300,000, like, you're getting a small system, maybe that's true. But if you're doing a true, like, if you got senior executives involved, and this is a $5 million, a $2 million, implementation plan, I mean, just think to yourself, would you launch a $5 million product anywhere else and believe it's going to launch itself, and you're only going to need a few people and a small implementation partner to make this a success? No. So that fault is on both people for being gullible. And I honestly believe most executives I talked to, they didn't believe it, but they went with it because it made the business case solid to not put in a bunch of cost that they then figured out they needed later. But to me, that's, penny wise, pound foolish. I mean, why do something like that to yourselves? It always causes undue burden and stress on everybody involved to do that. So,
do you think there's an element of FOMO, for want of a better term, and our competitor use Salesforce, so we must use Salesforce? I mean, look, we all made our career in Salesforce for the most part, right? Our recent career, so it's a great product, great people, and so on. But how much have you seen of that potentially? Like, our biggest competitor, direct competitor, they're on Salesforce. They're innovating, so we also better get ourselves on the platform.
No, I mean, and that is also a valid thing. I mean, I know other credit unions, once we got on Salesforce, would literally call and ask. I mean, credit unions are probably one of the more willing to share. Like, if you're in the banking industry, banks don't talk to each other. It's dirty word, cooperation. Don't cooperate in any way or talk. But credit unions actually are a pretty cooperative group. And I was actually surprised by the amount our senior leadership was open to talk to other credit unions at a high level. And that FOMO is real. It's not just at business level, by the way. You'll see that same fear of missing out within the company. So you're doing, let's just say you're building out right now for the leasing department or some financial services group. Pretty soon you're going to have a line of, even if you decide to start with this small group, you're going to have a line of the other departments that feel they're missing out. Why am I not getting Salesforce? Why is my department not on the list to get Salesforce? So it's a powerful motivator, and it's often valid. Now, sometimes you do get pure hype trains of things, and sometimes you got to watch out. So, if somebody's pushing you that they want a product that doesn't make sense, you're like, hey, this isn't really the roadmap. We have our roadmap built out. You really need a powerful business case for just FOMO type anxiety to purchase a new product, to go a new direction. I mean, I have, for example, I experienced some of the same stuff with the AI. We didn't have clean data for the use of an AI. I let them know that really we need to go on a data exercise first. And they really wanted to push, we need data cloud, we need AI, we need to purchase this now. Let's drop money and do that. And I'm like, let's build the foundation first before we get down that road. So sometimes you really have to, as a leader in Salesforce, push back on those ideas, for their own sake.
So can I ask you about, if you're working with an SI, right? They're the experts you're bringing in. A lot of people may not realize that often it's Salesforce that brings them in, and then they have, let's say, a little bit of a pressure to keep Salesforce happy, particularly not disrupt their sales cycle.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? And let's say balancing working with an SI and having, let's say, an independent or an internal a decision maker really driving that or doing your own research. Because right again, when you're hiring an SI, you're hiring them because they're the experts. Any word of caution or advice on that?
100%. So, biggest thing I could say is if you're trusting your SI partner 100% to make your decisions, which is what a lot of people think they can do, it is not a great idea. um, and I'm not talking bad about SI. I love a lot of my partners I've worked with. Often these deals they come, I don't want to say prepackaged with a partner already in mind that the AE gives you. That doesn't mean they're the best partner. You don't have to go with that SI just because they're the ones the sales guy tells you is great. They've done 100 of these. This guy's excellent. No, you should always do multiple bids, talk to these people, figure out other customer reviews, because like you said, if they get too involved in the process, they don't bring up certain things. I don't want to speak bad at SIs, but they're in a business too, and while you're their customer, they're going to get 5 more of these from the AE, so they can't really piss the AE off. They got to be careful. So, at some extent, you really have to make sure that your SI is truly beholden to you and not beholden to the sales executives. Now that can be hard, but that's why I like to have the deep expertise on my side as well, so I can be in that room when the SI says that's impossible, we can't do that, and I'm like, no, that's not true. That's not true. And they're like, well, I mean, it's hard. Well, you didn't say it was hard. You said it was impossible. And that's why also I'm a huge fan of being able to read statements of work. I mean, so many of these executives, they just sign off on these statements of work. For example, when I walked into Members First and I actually read their SOW, I said, this has so many red flags that this should just be the flag of China. I mean, this is there is 8 months of work shoved into less than 6 weeks. I was like, there's no way they can do these things. And the eyes in the room, like, well, this now makes sense because we're X weeks behind. We haven't even finished sprint 1, like, you have to be able to read a statement of work and know what's possible yourself and go, well, this is how they're able to beat the other guy's price by $600,000 is they're either not planning on actually delivering, or delivering something prepackaged and hoping you fit in it. Like if you see the word accelerators, that means they've pre-built something. They're hoping you just fit into it. So they may have flows pre-built or something like that, and they're just hoping you can fit into their standard process, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. But you have to know what those triggering words are in a statement of work, or you find yourself in trouble.
I think the partner piece is super interesting, and we've covered it a little bit in previous episodes. But one question or thought, I think, and I'd be interested to hear both your perspectives, because obviously, Maz, you work very closely with SIs, and Onttu, I know you've worked with dozens over the years. I think there is a general feeling in the marketplace today that it's become a bit of a popularity contest, right? It's not the best performer that is often picked. It's the one who shouts, sings, wines and dines the most, right? And combine that with a lack of proper due diligence when letting somebody become a registered partner, right? Or credibility, just pay your fees and, you become a partner and get X amount of certs, you get different rankings, right? I feel like that model's broken, right? And often when we speak to these customers, it's on both sides. I think you nailed it by saying it's an equal responsibility, right, between everyone. The truth's always somewhere in the middle. I'm a big believer in that. But I think there is a lack of standardization for partners at the moment, and where the AEs are referring partners, right? What's your thoughts on that? Onttu, and then Maz, if you want to chip in.
Yeah, just to hit on that last part. So, not to spill the secret sauce, it almost feels like, having been involved on, again, I was on the delivery side, not the pre-sales, but often it seems like it's just I don't want to say it's a random number generator deciding which partner's turn it is. Uh, but obviously there's some relationship built into that, that they occur. And, if they have a specialty, they tend to recommend them. But I'll tell you, honestly, the partner doesn't, I mean, the partner matters, but it doesn't. Let's just say that. You could be Price Waterhouse Cooper or Deloitte, and somebody's going to go, wow, I have the big boys on this project. It's going to go great. They could still send you the C team. You're looking around for that architect that was there in the pre-sales meeting, and and you're like, where's he at? They sent me 4 college grads that still trying to figure out what the setup menu is. So it's not just about the partner. You can't just say, because I have PwC or Price, or Deloitte or Solemn or any number of these great partners that exist out there, and say, you're set. I can now trust things are going to go well. Just let the train go to the end of the track. Everything's going to be good. What I do is I vet the people that are going to put on my team. I want to see the names. I want to see resumes. Obviously I'm not, for all intents and purposes, I'm hiring them, but I'm going to tell you if this architect you're sending me isn't going to work for me. You can tell me you're sending me your best, but if I'm going to sign a statement of work with you, I want to know who you're going to assign to the project. And I know there's windows involved in that too. So they can tell me these are the 4 people, but if I drag my feet 3 more weeks, I'm not going to get those 4 people. I understand that. I know how to move fast. That's a super important piece to me. But if I can't vet those people, I don't trust the partner. I mean, it's not about just trusting a partner. So it's about the people they put in the project. It's about knowing whether those people can deliver, because ultimately, at the end of the day, the best thing a partner gets you is the trust that they will make the effort for you to make things right. But the people at the end of the day are the people who are going to make your implementation or your system successful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to chime in on this, I'm not super involved pre-sales. As you know, I will say that I don't think that there's malice anywhere. I think that Salesforce, the AEs, particularly the experienced ones, they tend to recommend partners who they know have done a good job in the past in a similar industry. I think that's their number one criteria. Um, and they do that because they want you to stay with Salesforce and get the recurring revenue, right? Because they get continued credit. Um, they also want a partner who's going to pitch a lot of Salesforce services, because then they make a lot. There is sometimes the contention between, the disagreement, let's say, between the SI and Salesforce on what the product solution should be, and the client may never see that. They'll figure out figure it out amongst themselves, I think, and then come back to unified story. But you will very rarely see them argue on your behalf to Salesforce. It's almost an impossible thing to do. So I think it's important to understand that relationship. I do think, particularly pre-sale, you're spot on onto. You have to do your diligence on the partner you're bringing in. Even if they literally are the best in what they do, if they don't fit with your culture or how you operate, right, they may not be the best for you, right? And your point with, if the contract is lowballed or a very low number, and you're looking at it as it can possibly be done. Uh, Again, I don't think that's necessarily malice where they're saying we just want to close the deal and then get them later. I think that's usually a misunderstanding of what you guys need, or a better phrase would say lack of understanding of the complexity of what you need. And they're thinking a simple solution will just work. Like, oh yeah, you can track activity, so that covers your activity needs. When there's a lot more. So I think that's a red flag that they don't understand the requirements usually, or the complexities
Improper
of the
discovery.
build.
Improper
Well,
discovery
it's
is almost always.
pre-sale, right? I mean, keep in mind it's somewhat free work. It absolutely is. Like, all of that work that the SI is doing pre-implementation is literally free work, and it's a ton of value. Even just seeing what goes into the SOW. But at the end of the day, it's a long sales cycle, sometimes months, and they're eating that cost. So that's somewhat understandable.
Onttu, just a quick last question on this topic before we go back to the original theme. Do you ever get pushback from SIs you've engaged with in the past around having to around insisting that you want to perhaps see actual profiles or maybe even interview them before accepting a statement of work? Because I know there's a difference between an SI and staff org. You know, obviously, if you interview someone from an agency, if you get somebody from an agency, you're going to interview them, right? It's common sense. Like, you know, of course you are. But with an SI, sometimes it's like, well, you engage with a company and you kind of stuck with whoever, right? Whomever. So how do you phrase that without insulting them that you don't trust them, but also making sure that you do your due diligence to get the right team in place?
Yeah. So obviously, I don't need to interview everyone involved. I mean, you can have your general admins, you can have your analyst. I mean, again, the sophistication of those roles isn't to the point where I need to, take somebody's pulse and get a good beat on. But if you're selling me a technical architect or even a solution architect at those levels, 100% I need to talk to that person. I need to see, the certifications. The number of times I've been sold a technical architect and the person has not been doing it long enough to me to hold a technical architect certificate, or they're nowhere near technical architect level. They're just either being passed off as that due to, I mean, obviously it's a huge price increase to be pumped up to a TA. But as you know, in this world, a TA is a truly advanced position to have. Solution architect might be a little looser term that's bantered around. But to me, I just approach it from the position of, I mean, these are very important roles. These are very strategic. They're going to determine the trajectory of our system for possibly the next few years. And if you get too much pushback, I mean, you got to make sure you've also, structured your contract right. Do you have what's your rescission period? When can you, end that? If they refuse to give you names, I mean, that's also indicative of how flexible they're going to be in the future overall. So, to me, it's a great start. Like, where is this going to go? If they won't even let me have a name in any of this information, what kind of relationship are we really going to have? So.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a test at the end of the day. So look, we talked a little bit about, one of the things you're passionate about is defining the implementation process. There's a lot of nuances that go into that. We just focused a little bit on the kind of AE partner dynamic, but I just want to take it back. Something that you would put pretty high importance on is launching without clear objectives. We talked a little bit about that. But I know from our pre-brief call, you had a strong opinion, and a fair, valid opinion on IT being the only work stream at the table when it comes to CRM implementations. But your question was, well, where are the business users? So elaborate a little bit on that for us.
Yeah. So, I mean, those two things are tied together. They can be often tied together. So, fully admit Salesforce is a technical system. It's getting more technical all the time. It's getting wider, deeper, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, technology doesn't solve problems. So Salesforce is not going to solve your problem. You can't just put a bunch of technical folks in a room and tell them to build the best technical system, and it's going to be the one that gets used the best, and it's going to be the best for the business users. So, and now how that's tied to clear objectives is if you really don't have the business people there who have the objectives that at the end of the day are the money that you're attempting to build with this system. I mean, if you're building Salesforce just to solve a technical problem and you have no financial goal in mind, you probably have better tools out there. Salesforce should be making you money. I mean, at Howard Hughes, we redesigned that Salesforce system so that it was making them like $650 million, out of just Salesforce being used, that they were using in paper before that, and they were able to bring it online. So if you don't have those kind of goals where you have like a sales leader in there saying, hey, it would be so great if I could do this, and you don't have, your executives going, I need to be able to see my quarterly results by and you just have IT folks in there, you're going to end up with a very strong like they're going to have you probably one of the best data models, and you're going to understand your branches for your sandboxes, and it's going to be one of the best technically run systems, and you're going to have some of the best code you'd ever imagine. But if you didn't start with that first piece, that the sales objectives, the reporting, the what's in it for them, getting the people that the system is actually meant for to use it just isn't going to work. And I just hate to see two groups laying tracks and not lining those up ahead of time. So
Yeah, so I mean that's a great point. One of the things when you're doing early stage requirements, or call it high level requirements, there's a balance of, I have a project sponsor, right? They're the ones, let's say, with the checkbook, and they have certain goals. And often those goals, like you said, top level reporting, I need to know how I'm doing for the quarter. It's not something that's necessarily going to drive user adoption, right? It becomes, okay, so now this one guy wants a report, so 400 people have to type in detailed notes on every call. You know what I'm saying? Like there's sometimes the disconnect between the top level management reporting plus the user functionality for the actual end user, giving them more work for the purpose of management reporting that, let's say, could negatively impact user adoption, or at least make them not like it. Let's say. So, any thoughts on that kind of balance, or if you just flat out
100%.
disagree with it, let's say?
The with them or what's in it for them is still has to be front and center in your mind. So you have to collect all these requirements, and then you have to figure out how you achieve as many of these requirements and these objectives and all these business goals for these executives while driving the most user value as you can. So if I'm presented with a problem where, it's just real world example, I'm presented with a problem where I have a leasing executive that wants these detailed notes right here, I'm going to push back if I've already heard from the business that populating that much information just isn't how the call works. I'm going to push back like, okay, do you actually have time to read 6 paragraphs of information from these calls? Are you actually going to do that? No, I'm not going to do that. I just want to do it once in a while, and I click in there. Okay, so you clicking in once in a while to one of these calls and seeing those notes, is that going to drive enough value for you now to create, based on the user feedback, it's an hour extra work for 100 people a week? Is it worth that? And if they say no, then we can also look at solutions like, hey, well, I have this tool from Salesforce that will summarize maybe all this text for you, and make it, in a much smaller, it takes 800 of these and puts them all into, like, the general census is X. And they're like, yeah, well, that costs X. Are you willing to pay for that? And if they say no, then that helps solve those kind of decisions. So, I mean, Salesforce to me is at the level I do it often, those kind of high level discussions more than anything else is talking about trade-offs, understanding the way the system works, the art of the possible, all that stuff. So at my level, those are the conversations I'm having all the time, because if you don't know how to have those conversations and you just do what the executive told you, you end up with a system that may anger the entire user base because you just added an hour of work just for this one piece. Who knows how many things else you've added? So yeah, that's a constant, that balance.
So after seeing as many programs that you have over your career today, what would you, I'm sure there's more than 3, but what are the top 3 mistakes you see companies make time and time again when it comes to launching Salesforce and implementing Salesforce? Just kind of summarize top three for our listeners.
Pre-planning, it's not done like in detail, like we talked about. Not having a support model in place. So you could say that's pre-planning, but to me, not knowing how they're going to structure their Salesforce team. That could be onshore, offshore, nearshore, SI mix, how that's going to look. And then the third is executive alignment. And maybe you could say these are all about planning. But executive alignment is really important. I mean, at Members First, for example, it started in marketing and sales. The executive alignment was very aligned. It was marketing and sales. Midway through, they switch it to IT. Changes everything. Your executive alignment changes now that the ownership changes. I've seen that in other companies as well. So if you switch midstream, it can cause ripples. So you just got to do better planning.
Love it. Okay. Plan. So second topic we're going to focus a little bit of time on is around setting up new organization models. And we touched on it a little bit, but you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes there are customers that are doing net new Salesforce implementations or CRM implementations for the first time. We talked a little bit about pre-vendor selection, how to negotiate licenses, but just give us an idea a little bit more around why a solution architect might be the first hire on an org chart that a business might want to consider, and a little bit about once the system goes live, what does that sustainable model look like, assuming there's a partner dynamic in the equation, and give us just kind of some of your theory around how organizations should be set up.
Yeah, for me, it's a huge piece about what are you about to build. Are you setting up a small org? Is this going to be, 500 users, smaller? I mean, are you spending $500,000? Are you spending $1 million? Are you spending $5 million? I mean, that to me tells you your first hire. Okay, if you're spending 2 to 5, you're definitely your first hire. It may not be a solution architect. It may be an actual executive level Salesforce person. The titles are often interchangeable. I mean, I've been called an architect. I've been called a Salesforce director, a Salesforce manager, a Salesforce VP. I mean, the bigger your org, the higher level you want that person to be brought in sooner. Smaller orgs, I mean, if you're under 2 million, a solution architect is a great first start. They're going to be able to help whatever executive you currently have aligned to that, and help them avoid some of the pitfalls. The challenge with a solution architect is going to be in most of the solution architects may not be versed in some of the contract, statement of work type licensing pieces that may be important. So you may have to lean into an SI for that expertise, but they're going to be able to give you the data model piece, the true design elements that are going to prevent problems in the future. And to look for a good solution architect, you're looking for someone that already had, I mean, again, not to just speak in cert terms, but let's just boil it down. Like if you were just looking at hard certs and not experience, because that can be harder to measure. But they're going to have their admin, their advanced admin, their data. They're going to have probably around 3 to 4 certs at least. They're going to be, to me, they're going to probably have between 4 to 6 years experience at least in the system with progressing roles. You want to see that progression in roles as well, along with those certs. So, that's how I would say solution architect rolls out. So.
Now, you're somebody that has operated in a wide range of industries, yet we talked a little bit about maybe why companies might favor partners that have the industry experience. Where do you draw the balance between, being an industry SME and, not having any industry experience? I mean, some would argue, well, Salesforce is Salesforce, but then others would say, well, where the implementation is truly complex, it's because of the nuances of maybe the industry or the company and so on, and the processes, etc. Again, thinking about, how do these organizations build their teams around that, navigating that? What are your thoughts there?
So where I would say a SI with industry experience is like a requirement is when you're getting into these specialty clouds. So if you're implementing health cloud, implementing financial services cloud, you want an SI that has expertise in that area, that because these data models are often different. They often come with tools that are special. You know, financial services has tools normally you would not have access to if you were buying a normal Salesforce license, even unlimited, you know, with all the bells and whistles. So, you know, the other side of having an industry expert SI is that they're going to already know your business users terminology. I was actually surprised by the level of you know, disconnect you could see in business users when you didn't use the terms they were used to. So to me, it can be a big deal when you're using specialty clouds. But I'm also heavy on the side of that first camp that says Salesforce is Salesforce. I've the concepts are the same for me. I mean, I'm building an object. I mean, I often will actually break this down in Excel terms for my business users because they love Excel. An object is this, a row is that, a field is this on an Excel sheet. You know, basically we're just putting that here in this cloud. The cloud is other people's computers, you know, stuff like that. But ultimately, I tend to go specialty partner when it is a specialty cloud. And I tend to believe Salesforce is Salesforce at the highest level. So, I mean, if I walked in a one partner, I just had the experience with, I mean, not to throw partners' names around, but like I had a great experience with a company named Atrium. They were a top quality partner. If they came to me on a project and they were like, "Hey, we've never done, let's say, we've never done a financial services cloud engagement, but we really want a chance at this," I would totally give them a shot. So you build up relationships with people that will go beyond just the pure line of like, you know, expert in this industry, not expert in this industry. But if you are getting into a specialty cloud, I still do caution you to look at those people who specialize in that group. So field service is one of those.
Just a disclaimer, Atrium is a client of Gluon, and they definitely do financial services cloud and financial services.
I was just using an example. I actually use them.
Yeah. I don't want to some think that they don't. That is an area of expertise for them.
Yeah.
We usually shy away from calling out specific SIs, but particularly when something like that. Anyway, all good. So, industry expertise. One of the big benefits I see is not just like the Salesforce config. Like if they know the industry, they can think through the edge cases. Like, you know, they're telling you, okay, you're telling them this is our requirements. So the requirement sessions will definitely be more fruitful. I think users also will get a little bit less frustrated because sometimes they're very busy for their time. Very rarely is a user who's working with somebody gathering requirements from them is given some kind of reprieve from their day job. It's usually just added work. So I think there's definitely some efficiencies there. And then again, the big one I think is those edge cases that they'll be able to call them out, like, oh, are you thinking about this, or maybe in the future you'd want to do XYZ because that's common in your industry, or it could call the hiccup, or if they're familiar with regulatory compliance and that kind of stuff. So that being said, if you had a superb partner that has no industry experience, you would go with them over, let's say, a mediocre or decent partner, like the technical expertise over the industry expertise. Like, you think there would be a balance there where the technical expertise just would overshadow?
Yeah, so I would, just based on my experience, that a partner in a team that you've built trust with and have had great implementations with, I would take a risk with. If they wanted to go down that road with me and they believed in themselves, I would definitely take that risk with that partner. If they've proven themselves over a track record, 100%. Yeah, I've had, let's just say, other experiences with companies I won't say by name that were supposedly the best in their industry, and you know, highest recommendation from, you know, all the people, and they couldn't deliver themselves out of a situation that, you know, at all. So
Fair. Look, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to trust. If your back's up against the wall for whatever reason, even the best planned project can have its hiccups. Who do you want in there with you, right, in that ring with you to sort it out? So, I think it's if you've got a known entity, there's a lot to be said about that, right? Someone that you trust will deliver. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the deployment post go live of teams. So let's say good experience with an SI, but a customer is trying to build their team in house. Getting that right and the right mixture of onshore, nearshore, or onshore, offshore blend, contract versus full-time, contract to hire, it's a lot, right? So what's your kind of like 2 cents on how to go about that? What have you found that works well? What have you found that was just a disaster? Maybe to lean one way or the other, onshore versus offshore, whatever. But what are your kind of general thoughts and philosophies around post go live, specifically building your own team, getting that knowledge in house, and so on?
Yeah. So most important part is determining your budget. So you're obviously going to have negotiations with the CFO, probably whoever also your executive sponsor is, about the contribution level, the growth, the roadmap. Talk about what you need. You're going to obviously present a use case on a budget number that you're going to need. They're going to come back with you tell them 500,000. They come back with $5. You have that back and forth for a bit. You figure out eventually you're going to land on a number. That's when you can start designing your team. Now, some of this is going to be, to me, and this is the direction I go, at least at the executive level, is I need to know my budget first. And then I need to know the company culture. So I'm not going to go offshore if the company culture is we have to see a person. So I've worked at companies where if you have a person remote, nobody will interact with that person and nobody will ever, talk to that person. That person just gets ghosted. So obviously if I'm in a group like that, I tend to lean, I need to go on site, folks. On site is expensive. On site can be more difficult depending on your geographic location. I definitely engage with folks like yourself for augmenting my staff and getting new people hired when it's difficult areas, because you got to bring in expertise. A lot of companies will get actually caught up in that they want to hire everybody themselves. We can do it, and I'm like, this is a often hard role to fill already. We're filling it in a difficult geographical area, and we need a specific person. We need an expertise. So that's obviously one of my big pushbacks early on, is being able to use folks like yourself. They just, of course, HR always wants a crack at it, but I've often walked into like a CIO's office and thrown down, here's 5 resumes that HR sent me, and here's 3 that somebody like yourself might send me. Can you see a difference in this? Like, I'm going to go through 100 of these. It's going to use this much of my time, or I could get these crafted resumes and quickly fill my role, and we could quickly be getting moving. There's a cost associated with this. So again, this is learning some of your HR, but ultimately you start getting those people on board. You start determining whether, maybe I can have one person on site. I can then do a nearshore person down here, and that'll save me X. Then I have enough money for a staff aug group out of, with this company here, and they'll be able to give me 25 hours a week of this kind of dev or this architect, and then that allows me to do this and that. So that's the kind of work you're going to do. You're going to need to play a lot of Jenga and a lot of structuring, and it really takes expertise to know what you got to build, because that will change. And I'm a big fan of building a core team. It might be, depending on the size of your org, it might be 2-3 folks, but you're also going to need typically some sort of aug. Now, all that I like to call the keep the engine running bucket. If you have an aggressive roadmap, if you're especially if you're greenfield, you're going to have an aggressive roadmap of the new stuff they want to do. So if they want me building massive new things, and I'm not talking just day-to-day, like normal product roadmap, we're going to do scrum sprints, but if they're wanting to do true new project, I call it the boulders versus pebbles. I mean, my guys are out there breaking rocks down to pebbles, doing normal Scrum work. But if people are bringing us new boulders all the time, saying, "Hey, we need to do this new AI implementation. We need to do new data cloud. We need to do, all this other stuff." That's where I may go to that same staff aug group, and I may ask them for SOWs on implementations. That's totally separate. So,
Do you think that as we go into 2026, different trends will emerge around not so much about return of the office and so on? Don't necessarily want to take the conversation there, but around the balance of onshore and nearshore. It's something I'm passionate about, something I post a lot. I see big demand for nearshore at the moment. But do you, from what you've seen, the conversations you've been in, being at Salesforce and having kind of the inside eye, and obviously Salesforce announced they're going to put $1 billion into Mexico, for example. Do you think we'll see a drastic shift to blended teams around the world, or do you think it'll be more of a gradual?
well, most of the teams I've had have been blended. And that may be because I push them to go that way.
Yep.
But I do see a lot of teams that really do push against that. And I think it's business driven, not IT driven. I think IT is fully ready. I mean, they've been ready past the last 10 years to be in that method. But right now, a lot of the business is still holding back on doing that. And I think until you get the business to loosen the idea that they want a person to physically talk to in the office, as more of them become remote, then I think you'll have that loosen up. I think everybody's comfortable with devs being remote. It's when they get into their analysts, their architect, their business like architects, or their the people who are advanced admins and admins doing their work. They really want a person, some point of contact. And I think a lot of companies are figuring out you can have one point of contact and have that person be the on-site person. Now, obviously that can change, but I would say that's a trend I see in my friends is a lot of people are still pushing for on-site. I know Members First was a heavy on-site company as well. A lot of like Howard Hughes was a heavy on-site company. Textron, heavy on-site company. So
Yeah, the on-site off-site could be a whole podcast in and of itself, honestly, particularly with a lot of the cheating that's going on now with with using AI during interviews or having someone else taking the interviews, and it's another reason to use someone like Hero on this kind of stuff. It's getting bad. And then when you combine offshoring with it, and then managing, are they actually working the hours that they're working? Are they, it's rough. Anyway, so going back to what you were talking about earlier, it's funny because you had such a strong emphasis on pre-planning. I just kind of assumed you're a little bit more of a waterfall guy than an agile guy, and then now you're talking Scrum. So are you suggesting agile over waterfall, or just post deployment? You're thinking agile becomes better.
Yeah, post deployment, I'm agile. That's just how so many of the companies are set up that I've been in. Post deployment, it's almost exclusively pushed that you have to be agile by the orgs that I've been with. So prior to it, to me, it's all planning, and it's kind of a big bang. I mean, to me, Salesforce does not work on greenfield implementations as an agile project. It's a big bang. It's here. There was nothing and now there is everything. So on rollout we are waterfall basically, and the planning is the biggest piece. Like I said, you pre-plan, you roll out big, and then after that you start giving them the pebbles and rocks, and then you start finding new boulders, and the boulders will again roll out as waterfall. Now you may do parts of the project with your partner in, again, a Scrum type setting where they break it down into micro work, but without some sort of mix, you call it wagile too. I mean, I've heard a lot of terms where you mix waterfall and agile together, but yeah.
Yeah, those are really waterfall, though.
Yeah.
All of those are, because you're doing planning up front. Like you're planning all the sprints up front. You have tight deadlines, you have a tight scope because you have to meet the deadline, and you have budget because you have a scope, and you have right. So yeah, that's more a little bit more true. True. It's closer to waterfall than agile, let's say at least. The other question I wanted to ask you, post deployment, go live, right? You got your support model we talked a little bit about and staffing, but what about transitioning from the SI, right? These people aren't people like so. What's your approach to that? Do you keep them around a little bit? Do you let them go all at once?
Well,
And how
so
do you deal with that knowledge transfer?
yeah, it depends on, again, my budget, and what's going on, and what the culture is at the company. So some keep their implementation partners, whatever you want to call it, they're no longer implementation partner, they're partner forever, because they don't want to hire a certain number of people because they don't want to transfer that risk fully in-house and have the full headcount hit. The way I'll say it from often a Salesforce executive standpoint, I'm told it's not about the number, it's about where that budget comes from and how that budget is accounted for. So I've been told before, you can't have $500,000 for headcount, but I can give you 250,000 here and 600 over here for. And I'm like, well, those two numbers actually are higher. And they're like, yeah, but the other number doesn't count the same way. So you have to learn the way your CFO works and the way all those executive interactions happen, and you find out whether consulting budgets are handled in a different light than the HR budgets are handled, with the overhead that comes with that. And you may end up with a system where which you have permanent staff aug from an implementation partner, or just your partner at that point, versus a fully on-site team. I like to have a mix, because the reason I always like to have that partner availability is, again, it may be a low hour count, let's call it 20 hours, whatever. If I've staffed my team purposely for the day-to-day maintenance of my system, I've probably very low staffed any kind of dev, if I have any dev at all on my team. My people are mainly building flows, working as admin to advanced admin. Okay. Business analysts, stuff like that. So my dev work, I'm going to be farming that out probably to the partner. And that's typically how we'd handle it. Or if I have that dev on staff, they're probably one of my near shore or one of my offshore resources. And I might use those same 20 hours from that partner to bring in a higher level person, maybe a architect, or to do some sort of reviews, some kind of checks on system performance, maybe some flow reviews, consolidation, stuff like that.
So just to round out the podcast, you spent about 3.5 years at Salesforce as a senior business architect. So I just want to hear a little bit about, you can imagine for folk in the Salesforce ecosystem, working at Salesforce is often considered one of the end goals that everybody wants to experience. And a few have, and I'm always told it's a good experience, but just want to kind of talk through what was your process, and what did your process look like to get hired, your general impressions working for the mothership. Did it live up to your expectations? Was it better? Was it different? And just general kind of differences between working at Salesforce versus for the customer.
Sure. So I was actually working at Howard Hughes at the time. I was the director of Salesforce. I was approached by a person I knew in the past about a job that was open at Salesforce, and they asked me to apply. So I did. And the rounds of interviews, there was 4 rounds that I was part of. The initial round was pretty, I'd call it exploratory. It was just like an HR person telling me kind of the generalities of the position, how it was structured, some of the benefit stuff. Real could have been more than 30 minutes, in my opinion, if it was that. Then I talked to a hiring manager. Then I had a panel. The hiring manager, again, was just wanting to go over my resume, my certs, projects I worked, that sort of thing. then the panel, they really got into more like example-based stuff. So they asked me, hey, if this was going on, what would you do? You know, if this occurred, what would you do? Very, you know, real-world examples. They wanted to see how you'd respond, you know, to it. Pretty standard stuff that I would also do with, you know, hiring, just in a panel setting. And then the last was somebody who's in delivery, in the actual role I would be taking. They wanted to ask me more technical questions. So, you know, they asked me, you know, if this was doing this, what would you do? What level of debugging is that? You know, you know, it's much more technical based. And then that was it. I waited to hear back from them, got my offer and accepted, and you know, that's history.
So I know often we hear about the process being long. What was your process from start to finish? Because obviously they do the due diligence, multiple rounds. Roughly how long did that whole process take? And do you feel like maybe it was accelerated because you had a strong recommendation?
I think it was accelerated because I've heard people talk about it being longer than 3 months, and mine couldn't have took 30 days, 45 days. Couldn't even have taken that long because, yeah, I was actually having to decide whether I was going to move to Houston for my current Howard Hughes role at the time, and I decided against it because of the offer. But yeah, it was pretty expedient. I mean, a great experience. I mean, like you said, working at Salesforce is a lot of people's goal. It was mine. It was on my bucket list to check that off. One of the things I can say about working at Salesforce is you have unlimited resources. It feels like at your disposal. The other side of that is nobody tells you where those are at. So they're all there. You just have to figure it all out. And that's the part that I also say is great for having worked there. You learn the correct product departments. You learn, you know, the way the sausage is made, let's call it that. You learn the terms that are used in these accounts and these contracts. You learn in depth of what the front end licensing ties to the back end pieces in a lot of this, and that all just becomes so valuable later. Which is how I know we didn't really talk about. We talked about it in the pre-interview. That's how I caught that licensing mistake. Is I probably would have never noticed if I had never worked at Salesforce, but I'm able to read an actual licensing agreement and a Salesforce setup menu and go, these two things, this is trouble.
The irony.
So,
yeah.
So.
Any major difference between being Salesforce side than being customer side? Did you feel like perhaps you do the answer?
So obviously there's, I mean, it's the same with any consultancy. There's a lot of pressure for customer success being on the Salesforce side, and you're being billed out at such a high level. I mean, I don't know if there's a secret. Salesforce charges more than basically anybody else. But to get that, they're promising you a higher level of service. I mean, if I was at PwC, and I know folks that work at PwC and Deloitte's, that they don't have access necessarily to the product team every time. So they can't just drop a line to the product team and say, hey, this is not working the way I expect it to work. Whereas when you have an internal Salesforce consultant, I'm literally able to get in a Slack channel and go, hey, somebody from product, answer me why the menu's working like this. And I know according to the documentation, it's supposed to do this. And oh, some little thing that isn't in the documentation, somebody comes back with product to let you know about. And that was solved in an hour rather than, I don't know if you've ever heard of some of these troubleshooting things. They could take days where nobody knows, and you know, something so minuscule is the problem. So yeah, that tie into product teams was excellent. I mean, it can answer questions that normally take forever.
I'm really holding back on making a comment about the new Agentforce help site. Have you used it at all? We'll ask you.
I've not. That stuff all got rolled out after I, left my position at Members First. So I haven't really. It was still people I could talk to. So I haven't had the full Agentforce experience there. So.
Yeah, I haven't used it a ton either, but I've heard mixed things about it. So you were with the delivery team, so you were with the Salesforce Professional Services.
Yeah,
So um, I haven't never worked with them. Are they really better? Are they that good?
I thought so. I mean, we were often put on red accounts. I mean, number one thing I can say that the issue I saw was almost every system we had to go in and help. While we're being asked, I mean, again, if you're asking Salesforce to fix your problem, you've had a really bad time.
Mm,
They've almost exclusively went to 3 partners by this point, and nobody's been able to fix what's been done to them or fix it in a timely manner. And we're either being brought in as the primary partner or being brought in literally to watch the other partner. Like we are, the oversight to whatever work's being done there. But almost exclusively, the problems that you'll get are orgs that went with, I mean, went with a full dev team. So they hired nothing but devs. Everybody was a dev, um, and they built their system full code. And over time, they didn't obey some of those normal rules, and they changed out another dev. They changed out another dev. The notation in the system isn't right. They just can't figure out how anything works. Things are breaking. The whole system is coming down daily. They can't process. And this happened so many times, and it was consistently the same issue: is fully devved orgs eventually fail when you have people transition. That's the best way I could put it. And we were ripping out large amounts of code and refashioning things so that they would be flow based, or where they were code, we were going through and figuring out, hey, of this 7,000 lines of code or this 70,000 lines of code, how much is still used and how much did you deprecate? How much of this doesn't work anymore? So sometimes folks like myself are working with more technical architects that are reviewing, the Splunk side of things and figuring out, where all the, errors are at. And again, Salesforce has logs that they don't even share with customers that they're able to look through to see problems as well. And I get access to even information when I was there, that normally you normally have to pay for as part of like maybe signature or even higher success plans, but because they've engaged us, I'm getting that data and able to share it with them. I mean, there's a lot of pluses. They even bring in program architects too. I didn't do that, but yeah, I mean, I feel the stuff that I did there was definitely worth the cost. And I would say if somebody has a really problem org, that's probably going to be where they go.
it's the multi-pronged team expertise approach, right? The white glove service. And again, you pay for that, right? You pay for what you get. I think we could sum up the whole partner space with that motto. But Onttu, very quickly to wrap up, what's next for you? What are you up to at the moment? And what are you looking forward to next?
Well, at the moment, I'm just taking a break. I'm actually sailing the world for. I've been doing so since about March or so. Been on this year. Again, about 80 days of sailing so far.
Wow.
So for me, what's next is if I find something exciting that I'm interested in doing. I really do like greenfield implementations. I would love to get in on another greenfield implementation where I'm at the beginning doing the planning. Don't necessarily like greenfield implementations where I'm brought in 6 months into it. But some people can say they like that excitement too, and maybe some part of me does like trying to steer the plane before it hits the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's probably what's in for me next. I mean, just kind of waiting around, seeing if I find anything that really attracts me back into the market.
Cool. Well, I hope to see you back in the market because I know it's a very small world. We've got shared contacts, and everybody always says you do a great job as a people leader, but also from a technical perspective as well. So enjoy your sailing, but don't enjoy it too much would be my message. But Onttu, thank you so much for spending time with us today to share your experiences in the Salesforce ecosystem to date. We just want to say thank you first and foremost.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And for our listeners, if you want to hear more stories like Onttu's, please do not forget to subscribe to the CRM Success Show for more episodes featuring leaders who are shaping the present and the future of CRM. Thank you.